justice for all, living healthy on a planet spinning out of control. You're aware of the issues, you've got something to say. Diversity in living every day. An open mind can unlock any door. Maybe you just want to know the score. Log on. Say Kermit.com.
Well, now I was just thinking there was a controversy, a mild one, about Tomi Longren. You probably heard about her on The Daily Show. Trevor Noah had her on.
Yep.
And then some staffers sent her some cupcakes afterwards, right? And people were going, oh, my God, it's horrible. And I remember thinking to myself, and I was trying to think of a context for it, and Tomi is Neiman Marcus, the Neiman Marcus of hate.
Yep.
And by that, I mean Neiman Marcus sold collard greens for $66 about a month ago, which is mind-boggling because, trust me, every black person in America heard this and went, get the fuck out of here.
Right.
I mean, Clarence Thomas was going, really? Ben Carson woke up, right? Ben Carson's also, he went, Jesus would not approve. And, but they sold out because there was a market for it, right? And it's Neiman Marcus. It's the packaging. Then they had the stone in a wallet that came after. I don't know if you heard about this. They sold a stone, basically a brick, a rock, in a pouch. This is the pet rock beyond another level here. Right. They sold that for about $50, and I'm sure they're moving that product, which tells me Neiman Marcus can sell anything.
Right.
And obviously there's a market for it. So I'm pretty sure they could sell a turd. But no, they would package it this way. The turd is, reusable, recyclable emissions that came, from a vegan Brazilian that, some sort of, be some sort of packaging like that to make the turd palatable. And they sell that for about $50 in a box. Tomi Longren is that turd.
Got it.
If you put it in David Duke's mouth, it doesn't sound good. But this country, and this is coming from through the eyes of a black man. Blondes are sacred in this country. If you're reasonably hot and a blonde, a blonde can tell half the guys in this country, if you want to prove you love me, cut off your penis. And there are guys who will grab a dull butter knife and go to work. Right. Exactly. They will. And by the way, brothers to our chagrin. Just putting that out there. Black women have huge issues with this. I don't blame them. But Tomi Longren is a cute petite blonde who can say stuff that we would dismiss from anyone else, including people who are basically inclined to listen to a David Duke. They're like, dude, we've heard that from you. Okay, yeah, I know. Black people are bad. They're like the Klan. Blah, 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 blah. Tomi Longren comes up and it's like, wow, she's fiery. She's feisty. In parentheses, I really would like to do her while she's saying this. And that's the package. And I think we need to treat it in the future when you see this. And by the way, Fox has leveraged this for years, be it Megyn Kelly, be it the Fox and Friends females,
right?
Anybody, Greta Van Susteren, in other words, right?
You could even, Ann Coulter, if you wanted to go back to that one point in her life. But
yeah, but the Adam's apple just kind of overruled everything. Right. Bigger than mine. And I have an 18-inch neck, okay? That's not a good thing. But, but Ann's lost her fastball if she ever really had one, right? So she's hittable now. She's basically a female Kurt Schilling. And, and so, Tomi comes along, Tomi's the young gun, right? She's Clayton Kershaw. She looks like you could do her. Hell, if I could duct tape her, I'd probably take her out on a date. But, that wouldn't work. Right. So, that's the new packaging. And the alt-right is using it. They've refined the Fox format to another level. And so I think you'll see more of that in the future. And in the future, we should just treat it as a Neiman Marcus marketed turd and proceed accordingly. Don't buy it.
Right.
Don't. I can sell it to you for a lot less.
Well, that kind of leads to what we're talking about, though, Jim, right?
Right. So far away.
You wanted me to throw this out when George got on, but it's like, and everything George is saying is true, except for one thing. We've now reached the point where reason doesn't play a part in anything anymore.
Yeah.
Dietrich Bonhoeffer, from prison, from the concentration camp, Stupidity is a more dangerous enemy of good than evil. Against evil, one can protest, it can be exposed, and if necessary, stopped with force. Evil always carries the seed of its own self-destruction, because it at least leaves people with a feeling of uneasiness. But against stupidity, we are defenseless. Neither with protest nor force can we do anything here. Reasons have no effect. Facts that contradict one's own prejudice need only to be disbelieved. In such cases, stupid people even become critical. And when facts are unavoidable, they can simply be swept aside as meaningless, isolated cases. Stupid people, in contrast to evil ones, are satisfied with themselves. Indeed, they become dangerous in that they may easily be stimulated to go on the attack. Therefore, more care must be taken in regard to stupidity than to evil. That's from a man thrown in the concentration camp for opposing the Nazis.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I think you're right. We've gone to the so-called post-fact society.
Yeah.
And I think Trevor Noah was onto something where you treat it like a toddler, because reason is the enemy of a toddler. But why? Well, explain. But what? No. Keep going. You tease them out as much as you can. But I also think we used to simply isolate. We used to isolate the fringe. I mean, I'm old enough to remember the John Birch Society. Remember those guys?
Yep.
There was a major league pitcher who probably name was Eric Schau. I think he passed away some years ago. He pitched for my San Diego Padres. And he had a pretty good career, and then it came out he was a John Bircher. And, yeah, right?
John Rocker's career sort of went on a nosedive when he came out.
Yeah, but he didn't have a political ideology. He was a meathead.
Well,
And
right.
You know what I'm saying? I mean, I would say Schau, the closest thing to Schau I've seen in the last 25 years is Curt Schilling.
Yep.
And Kurt had the good grace to keep his mouth shut during his career. Actually, yes. I think he'd have been fine during his career. As Jim Bouton so beautifully put it, ERA gets conflated with your IQ. So as long as Kurt was throwing, bullets and hanging up zeros with the Sox, he could have advocated for the execution of Elizabeth Warren. And there'd have been people going, we should consider that one. I mean, now, of course, he's pretty much Steve Carlton. Don't forget, Steve Carlton, when he finally opened his mouth, there were a lot of people going, oh, God, dude, now you open your mouth? You should have kept it shut. So I think there's a certain amount of fringe. I separate that from Rocker, who just seems to be his neurons aren't firing in sequence. Schilling actually tries to develop an ideology. Schau had one. But the point I was making was that the John Birchers have become mainstream at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's something where even so-called legitimate conservatives, Ronald Reagan ran like hell from the John Birchers. No matter how sympathetic he might have been with certain aspects of their philosophy, he would not be caught dead in public hanging with them. Now, they're in the White House. And I'm sure the Birchers are like, we were ahead of our time and we feel cheated.
Right. So I guess, so the question is, in this post-fact world, is there anything we can do about it? And I'm going to give you two examples of, perhaps a reason why Hillary Clinton didn't do as well as she should have. Again, there's plenty of stuff out there to suggest that she probably did win this election or should have, with the exception of the voter suppression and the voting issues in Detroit and all that, but put that aside for the moment. We had Hillary Clinton. Her most famous line from the campaign was the basket of deplorables. And you got people wearing their shirts saying, hey, I'm a deplorable. It became a badge of honor amongst the people who live in this post-fact world. You compare that to what Bernie Sanders did in that town hall that was on MSNBC the other night, and the 2-minute clip where a woman who was vociferously in support of Trump spent time during the program making it clear that it didn't matter. The facts really didn't matter. But the moment that Bernie respectfully walked her down the path and said, where they're talking about Medicare and Medicaid and all that, and she was saying, yes, of course we should have that. And he basically said, and you know what? The Republicans are looking to cut it. And he actually got this Trump voter to state that, yes, the top 1% should pay for that. They've made money off the backs of those of us down below. They should pay for it. And Bernie's response was essentially, that's what I'm talking about. But it's the distinction of how, I mean, if there's a way to reach out to those folks, I mean, it's going to have to be not through ostracization, but we actually have to talk to them. But going down the path of, as you said with the toddler, you gotta force them to talk it out. There'll be people who will simply shut you out. But if there's any hope to reach these stupid people, quoting from what you were talking about, Tony, I mean, you've got to. I mean, there's got to be a way to reach out to them. And again, I look to Bernie, and I'm sure there are plenty of other politicians who can carry that mantle and have that discussion if people are willing to have that.
Tony, you better lead off. I'll kick back and wait for a minute here.
Well, I think last week we started alluding to this. I think George and I talked a little bit about this last week. Is part of our problem with dealing with stupid people, I think, is giving them too much leeway with their stupidity and being too much of a, to use the toddler analogy, too much of a permissive parent. Like the Democrats and the liberals are playing by the Marquis de Queensberry rules. And, I think it was in the Times today, New York Times was saying something about, and the Republicans are the World Wrestling Federation. They don't care. They know it's a show and they're going to play to win. And I think the left is, one of our faults is, we get too caught up in doing the right thing by everybody at all times that we're not even contesting all the irregularities of the election. The Times piece pointed out that right after the 2000 election, they got James Baker, former Secretary of State, to head the fight to make sure the legitimacy of the Bush election stood. They didn't talk about irregularities. They just want, we're not losing this election, and they went out and did it. And we are not doing that. And we do a lot of fighting amongst ourselves instead of saying, all right, what's the team goal here? And part of it is the fruit of our own success in some ways. We alluded to this last week, too, that, part of the reason we have the situation we have is, we have a dominant white male narrative, right? So we have no common story anymore. But we have no common story because it's made a little progress in saying, hey, this other voice in the story got left out, this voice got left out, this voice got left out. But instead of trying to weave those into one story, we're fighting the people who want their old story back. And instead of saying, well, we need to listen to their story too, we're like, no, we're going to make one story, but we're going to include everybody. You get to be included, but that's it. And we're not forceful that way. Like, we're not giving the kid a spanking and sitting it in the corner. We're being too nice.
And let me piggyback on Tony here for a second, because, first to address your point, Hillary, they're going to write volumes on this in the years to come. Some will happen probably after I'm gone. Maybe I'll get a chance to write the book my damn self. Hillary lost this election in part. She made some of the same tactical mistakes they made in 2008. I just read an article in Politico how people in Michigan were begging for resources to be sent. Yep. I have a friend who worked in both of Obama's campaigns on the ground game, seriously. I mean, I did some work, but this guy was hardcore. And he was furious this is dating back 6 months ago. He was furious at Hillary, and he thought there was a real chance she would lose the election because of just tactical ground game errors, which she made. So, we can look at Donald Trump won through a perfect storm of circumstances.
Absolutely.
In that there were 6 million fewer voters this year than there was in 2012. Now think about that, 6 million, Trump won by 100,000 votes in 3 states. He lost the popular vote by 2.5 million anyway, even with the fewer voters. Yeah. So if you get 1 in 12 voters who didn't vote to show up in the battleground states on election day, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
And on top of that, there's reason to believe that, again, I mentioned it before, in Detroit, that whole voting system was completely screwed up.
Oh, it was. And look, the Comey garbage. Yeah. He should have been fired summarily for that, because it's according to Nate Silver, he absolutely tipped the election.
Yep.
But Hillary's loss is like a team that's favored to win and they commit 5 or 6 turnovers. They don't convert in the red zone. They settle for field goals instead of touchdowns. And then the other team wins on a Hail Mary. You know, you could say the better team didn't win, but the other team let them in the game long enough. So I'm willing to somewhat move past that because I think in some ways it's the best thing that could ever happen to any of us. Hillary Clinton win would have wallpapered over some differences. We wouldn't have had some very hard conversations that we should have had. And that goes to where I think where Tony was going, at least where I would agree with Tony, in that we definitely need to rethink tactics. I look at what's going on in North Carolina. You have the Republican Party there basically enacting a coup against the new governor because they lost the election. And they are playing for keeps. And my question is, are we going to, as far as the quote-unquote stupid people argument goes, some people you're going to reach. I mean, I'm looking at this from my personal experience. There are people in this world I learned when I was, about 10. My parents tried to teach me even sooner. There were people, there's a percentage of these people in the world who will dislike me on sight. Nothing I can say or do will change that. And I was told, George, that is your lot in life. Get over it. That's a them problem. It's not a you problem. Keep your head up, no matter how much it hurts. And you live through that. You work with the people you can work with. And we have to do the same thing. There's people we will not reach. So be it. There are other people you can reach with a carrot. There are other people you can reach with a stick. Calibrate your responses accordingly. I think one problem we have, and I think Rick Perlman talks about Perlstein, or is it Perlman? Perlman talked about it in Nixon land, how repeatedly in the 60s, when the Democrats went from a landslide victory in 64 to getting smoked in an even worse fashion in 72, that's 8 years. I wasn't born for the Goldwater one. I can barely remember the Democratic convention in 72 because my parents talked about it. You saw a 180 flip. And one of the reasons why was progressives sat around thinking, hey, wait a minute, we got the moral high ground. Can't you see how morally right we are? And, you know, you had that so-called Senate majority. It's like, whatever, dude. You know, the blacks are about to burn the country down, the hippies and the teens and everybody else, and it got exploited. And it got exploited on a city, a state, and a federal level with surgical precision. It wasn't accidental that Nixon won. It wasn't accidental that he leveraged the Southern strategy. It wasn't accidental that all these Southern Dems flipped to the Republican Party. That was tactical decisions that were made with certain cold-eyed calculations towards the gathering of power. It's nice to be morally right. You know, to be a progressive means you were pro-civil rights. Be progressive means you were pro-abolition. It means you were pro-women's suffrage. It means you were pro-LGBT rights, right? Going up and down the list. Okay, whoop-de-damn-do. We win battles. I prefer winning wars. Right. And it means that we have to seriously, fundamentally look at how we approach things and save those you can. Get enough of those you can, and the rest will see the benefits you hope. And then you sell the benefits, you market the benefits accordingly. I mean, Republicans pimp their think tanks. I know about the Heritage and Cato Foundation. I don't know what the liberal equivalent is.